Hey YouTube, when you're a prepper, it's more important than anything to know why you're prepping. And I'm not talking about just specifics of, types of disasters or calamities. I'm talking about why you are prepping for yourself and family. In particular, let's focus on ourselves here in this video. You have to know who you are and what your purpose here on earth is. Some people would say there is no purpose. Some people would say the purpose is just what you make of it and what you create. But there's also a type of more innate purpose that's built into all of us. There's questions that we can ask ourselves and reflection on memories, especially in our childhood, to get more of the answer. If you look back at when you were a child, a young person, remember those things that you used to do that would help you kind of get lost in time, or you would just kind of like, almost wake up in a cloud and realize that you just been doing that activity for 3 or 4 hours. And for me, when I was real young, I used to play with Legos and Lincoln Logs and all those building kits, if you will. I think some of them were called Technics, and I used to do that. And I used to draw a lot, and I used to like to play basketball and just things like that. I'd burn up the time so fast, and I wouldn't even know how the day went by so fast. I wasn't even aware of it. Now, if you fast forward to our adult life, because of responsibilities and having to be quote unquote practical, we put aside a lot of those interests and those behaviors and activities that were so natural to us. And so being a prepper, it is very good to reconnect with those. It may be different now than when we were a child, obviously. We have new interests and there's new opportunities. But it is important, though, to nonetheless reconnect. And so some of the questions that you can ask yourself to reconnect would be, and they're very simple in nature. If you had all the resources that you could possibly ever want, unlimited resources, how would you live your life? What would you do with your time? You can also ask yourself, what makes you happy? And just that simply, and of course, these questions really would be best used if you had a sheet of paper and you wrote down answers, and then you reflect upon them. Even if you took a few weeks of your life and wrote down various answers and go over them and refine them, and not try to over filter your answers either. If anything, you almost want to just allow yourself to put anything down and just let things free flow. And the more you allow yourself to really open up, the more you get to the real answers eventually. So if you had unlimited resources, or if you had all the money in the world, what would you really do with your time, with your life? How would you live your life? What are the things that you do now as an adult that causes you to reflect on where the time went? Is it reading about certain types of material? Like for me, like right now in my life, I still gravitate toward gear reviews on YouTube, for example. I have this thing that I have no problem sitting and watching 3 or 4 videos back to back and burning up a couple hours sometimes and not even really noticing it. Just as there's times that I'll be reading a good book and of whatever I'm into, and it's just amazing how I don't know where the time went. And also there's times that when I'm prepping, there's certain types of activities within prepping that I very, very much enjoy. And it's my hobby to some degree. Some of the prepping activities I do not like and have no interest in. Nonetheless, you still have to do it, first aid and water filtration techniques. All this is somewhat boring to most. but you still need them. But there are some things like kit building. For me personally, designing a certain pack system for a certain specific reason or purpose. To me is fascinating, especially like pretty much now I'm into like smaller, lightweight or ultra lightweight survival kits, and I enjoy the research and the challenge to find each element and how you put them together, the culmination to create that the result, the event. But for me though, it's the enjoyment. About 80% of it is just the activity of the doing to get me to that end point. It's not actually the end point itself totally. That's just like the icing on the cake. The majority of the real pleasure and my real interest is the challenge during the process. Just like great artists, they don't really most of the time work toward an end result. It's the process of building the art to get to the end is really what is they're after. It's that process, not so much a result at the end. But it just depends on what they're after. And so us as preppers, it's going to really help our focus and our direction and motivation and just a whole echelon of things. If we get to know ourselves and what we want and what we like, and having purpose in our own personal lives, it'll give that much more credence of why we need to continue to do what we're doing, especially in the climate we have today. In this particular global climate of economic and political and just fear mongering and lies within the media and so much disinformation within the climate that we have, I'd say that there's more reasons than ever to find yourself and to reinforce the reasons of why you're doing what you're doing. And so, I think that over time, though, the more we get in sync of who we are, not only does it become more natural to do what we want and need to do to be who we are, but we get the chance and opportunity to dig a lot deeper. And I know for me, though, I'm in a lucky situation in a lot of ways to be able to communicate with you and to get responses and feedback and to have access to the internet. You may say, well, a lot of people do, but I actually use it though. Like I actually really look things up and compare and contrast and use it as a research tool. And you may say, well, doesn't a lot of other people do that? Some people may, but you'd be surprised. The great majority use it as a distraction tool. A great majority use the internet just for entertainment. And for me, yes, there's a lot of entertainment factor, but there's also a lot of real stuff that can come from using the internet as a tool to better yourself. Just like you can use a good reference book or going to a good survival training class or any kind of class to better yourself. It could be, first aid, CPR, whatever. And I think it's important to kind of point out that we need to grow as individuals. And that typically has to come, though, from knowing ourselves. How can you grow if you don't even know what you want to grow into? And so this is just a kind of an open-ended conversation, maybe even a challenge video for you to try this yourself, to ask those big questions, to devote maybe at least a few minutes a day for maybe a week to explore what your results are of what you want to do with your time. Who are you trying to be? Who are you now? And what are you actually working toward? Because sometimes we're working toward things that we don't even know we're working toward. Sometimes we don't even know what we're even doing because we're just trying to, in our mind, maintain status quo or to keep treading above water. But we don't understand what is above the water that is so important to tread to do. Maybe we're not supposed to tread water. Maybe we're supposed to be fish and we're supposed to swim in the ocean. And maybe we have gills and we just don't know it, figuratively speaking. So instead of trying to do a certain thing, maybe we're doing the wrong thing. And maybe we have to just make some changes. And our whole life changes from that for the better. And so don't always assume that everything is right where it should be, especially if you haven't reflected upon anything, especially recently. A lot of people who actually do and study this that are into this type of introspection, they say that you should probably do this about twice a year, like about every 6 months. Really sit down for a good few days or a week, and allow yourself to really just open up again, and reconnect with purpose and focus. And so with this, I hope this is helpful, especially for preppers that are trying to maintain this sense of togetherness and focus within not only their preps, but motivation to continue, because it can be a bit frustrating, if not a bit overwhelming, as I get a lot of emails about this and a lot of messages on the channel about how overwhelming it is. I mean, even just to get a 3 to 6 month supply of everything, it takes a bit of time, especially if you're on a budget. And for those who are really trying to get to that milestone that typically is what everyone wants to be at, which is the 1 year mark of having everything, which is a big challenge. It's a big task. That seems to be so daunting that most people just can't really realistically picture themselves at that point. But it is possible. It just depends on how much you're willing to sacrifice and what are you willing to do. And even if you never get to that point, it's okay. Just do the best you can. And in the meantime, try to continue to find and develop who you are and what you need to be doing with your life, because it's not all about just going to work. It's not all about, trying to keep up with a certain news organization or a handful of YouTube channels, even though it's great. YouTube community is wonderful. Everyone here is, for the most part, just very nice and very intelligent. And, we learn a lot from each other. And I think that's the whole purpose of community anyways. Community is to help each other and to better each other. And when you build each other up, the whole unit gets built up. And so with this, though, we just have to also reflect on the opportunities that we have on an ongoing basis to better ourselves. And not to get kind of just so complacent, because we get so comfortable maybe in our life at sometimes. And it could be just we have a very cushy job, or maybe we're retired, but we're still pretty young. And so you have a lot of things that you can do with your life still. And instead of trying to constantly distract yourself from doing things that you may really want to do, you may want to start focusing on those things that you really want to do, that you not only just put on the back burner, but you almost pretty much delete it from the facts that you can even do them. And I'm not saying you have to do anything elaborate. Some people say, "Oh, if I had all opportunities, all the money in the world, I would travel nonstop." But ask those people who are world travelers. You can only do it for so long, and you get homesick, or you just get tired of living out of a suitcase. You get tired of eating in restaurants and not having certain home cooked meals, or having the comfort of your own home. And so while there's a very few people out there that actually do almost live out of a suitcase through their whole life, it's not for the great majority of people. That's a very special kind of person. So yeah, I'm not talking about, you have to do anything extraordinary. In fact, we're all extraordinary, in a lot of ways. We're special in that sense, in a good way. But what I'm talking about with our time, though, it could be something as simple as, maybe contributing to the community, or maybe there's something that you want to write and pass on to others. Or maybe it could be something as simple as a YouTube channel that you check in once a week and you make a 5-minute video and you just kind of reflect on a certain topic. That's cool too. And that's kind of where I found myself, writing this ebook, making a few videos a week here on YouTube, and other things in my life, especially, doing prepping and learning a lot more about my hobbies that sometimes are in prepping. That's very satisfying. In fact, it really kind of makes me always scratch my head about all the new things and what's the next new thing? And it's not that I'm living for new things. It's the excitement and just the possibilities are fascinating. Just amazing what's out there. And so it's so fun just to kind of be like a part of this, because I do, send various comments and opinions to various manufacturers I'm very opinionated, or I share my ideas at least here on YouTube. And I'm not so sure how many manufacturers actually, watch this channel. I have no clue. Maybe none, maybe some. But nonetheless, you know, it's amazing how sometimes you'll talk about something that you want to see for a few years, and all of a sudden it just pops on the market, and you're like, wow. Did that happen because we were all talking about it, or was that going to happen regardless? But regardless, it's here, and let's celebrate, And so it could be anything from a new backpack that we're always looking for, to tweak something here, and that's the thing. And there's so many different things, especially if you're really into prepping. There's more than just a handful of categories within preps, and that's so cool. That's what my ebook that I'm writing right now. It's just a really nice, simple type of outline guide for preppers, just to get a handle, on the big picture of prepping. And I think that for most people is just what you need, just to know the parameters of prepping, because it's a bit more, encompassing than people really give it credit for. It's not as simple, really, as it would seem. That's why my channel is called The Art of Prepping, because if anybody could do it, it wouldn't be an art. And it definitely is something that not everyone is doing. In fact, it's a very, very small minority of people. Probably on the upper end, anywhere from 5 to 7% of the population does some form of prepping. And that's just kind of from the best estimate. Of course, we don't really know, because a lot of preppers like myself, if they were polled, I wouldn't admit that I was prepping, in the general public. I would probably deny it. So, we have to just kind of be mindful of who we are and what we're doing, what we are working towards, and how to go about doing it in the fashion that is satisfactory and hearty to us, something that we want to maintain. And that's why for me, gear, because it changes and evolves as society and technology and the times, it's fascinating. I mean, there's some channels on YouTube, obviously they specialize a little bit more in one type of gear than others. Some people kind of have a bit more heavier slant toward flashlight reviews, or bow and arrows, or crossbows, or guns, or backpacks, or even, just various multi-tools or pocket knife. There's just so many. I mean, there's just the categories on and on. It depends on what you're really into. And that's the beauty, that you can find your individual nature within prepping, because there's so much to offer. I mean, there are some people who literally just focus on the food preps as their main hobby, even though they prep for everything in terms of all the categories. Their real passion is to can out of their garden, to can their vegetables that they grew, or to dry goods, maybe dry fruits, or to save seeds. And this is and that's the cool thing, because it's so diversified. Now, I haven't really personally met anyone that their hobby was to store water. That would be, I mean, there could be, if that's your thing, that's cool. I mean, we all need it. It's one of the most essential things, but don't get me wrong, there's probably people who put great time and effort in making sure they have great reservoirs, even people who actually dig out ponds and even lakes, just for the fact to have that, reserve, besides obviously, fish and other things that could be in there for food. But the cool thing about this is, that you could, if you really want to, that could be your hobby, finding different ways of storing water, and maybe collecting various containers. And I mean, you could do it if you want. I mean, there's enough supply and gear out there that you could have a whole medley, a real collection of drums and containers and all kinds of things. And but once again, it depends on what gets you up in the morning, what distracts you in a good way, what kind of things that really get you to the point that time is missing, as we talked about earlier. When you just don't even recognize that an hour or two just blew by, and it's already time to go to bed, or you have to go to bed now, because that's when you hate to go into bed, because you want to read a little bit more about that material, or you want to watch one more YouTube video on that subject matter, or you want to go on Amazon and see if the price dropped at least another couple dollars because you want to make that purchase. That's the kind of thing that I'm talking about, that you have a winner there, because it hooks you in. and it connects with you in ways you can't even identify fully. It's just there. It's the reality, and you should embrace that. You shouldn't be embarrassed about it, or you shouldn't be like, oh, I'm ashamed because I like multi-tools, or I like to make leather sheaths for fire starters, or whatever it is that could be unique. There's nothing to be ashamed of. And the more actually you explore those, the more that you develop, and you'll be happier, you'll be more focused, and the things in life that you have to do because we're so-called grown-ups and we're so-called, living in the real world, which I hate people saying that crap. Are you living in the real world? That's just ridiculous. But we're all living in the real world. We all have our own take on reality. To believe it or not, I mean, reality to a large degree is subjective. It's not something that's just carved in stone. Depends on how you want to look at things, what kind of perspective you have. And so this idea that everything is just a certain way is totally not true. And especially the more you get to know who you are, the more reality is going to be more true to you, and the more you can enjoy your life. This is The Art of Prepping. I wish you all well, and I'll talk to you soon.